Welcome to Three Principles Conversations with Christian McNeill, a series of conversations with Three Principles practitioners exploring a new explanation of how humans work. Insight into this understanding can help transform quality of life, relationships, and state of mind.
So, hello and welcome to Three Principles Conversations with me, Christian McNeill. This podcast is about a new understanding, which is commonly known as the Three Principles paradigm, although it's also known as the Inside Out understanding and has various other names. Today, I'm in conversation with George McRae. George is a well-being coach and Three Principles practitioner, as well as being a company director. His main focus previously was brand strategy and design for over 30 years. And that interest is now being enhanced and supported by his understanding of the principles. So welcome, George. Thank you very much for agreeing to be here today. We've known each other. We've been fellow travellers, as it were, in this work, in this inquiry for a few years now, and I've really enjoyed our conversations, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to bring it, hopefully, to a wider audience. And the whole purpose of these calls is to give people a sort of sense of what the three principles are and why they might be interested in finding out more about them. So before we get to that, tell us a bit more about who you are. What's your background, what's your story, and what has shaped the worldview that you have today?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, you know that I don't see myself as anything particularly anymore. There are certainly roles that I play, and I've got a story. Yeah, everybody's got a wee story and where they've started out and how they've come to be where they are in this moment. And mine, if it's that kind of thing you're interested in, is I think a lot of people are kind of always, even in the background, interested in kind of what's the point of all of this? What's the point of life and what am I up to? And is it a good thing I'm up to? It's always kind of going on. A wee kind of, even if it's just time to time, a question: Am I doing the right thing? Is this good? How do I feel? And probably about 8 or 9 years ago, the agency was doing great financially. You would say the project we're working on was great, but I felt there was a kind of the only way I can describe it is if something was stale. Now, I'd probably go further these days, but at the time, it just felt like my life was a little bit boring or stale. Or is this it? Is this all there is? And then, luckily, I bumped into a beautiful woman that was just speaking so clearly about the human experience, and was the person that, if you like, pointed me to this simple understanding of the three principles, or the inside out experience. And so I got super fascinated, and
How did you come across her? How did your paths meet? I'm always curious about that.
Colette and I were already interested in some of the, we were going through the NLP kind of channel and understand some of that stuff. And Colette's also a client of mine. So we rebranded their company, Colette and her husband's company, at the time, which I loved doing. And she loved it. And she loved the freshness it was brought to. So we were having conversations anyway that would go from work stuff to this, what I would call the human experience. And unbeknown to me, she had been getting taught something very basic, the three principles. And when she showed me that, in point of fact, I went to see her, I'd almost seen it. I did a drawing for her about how I thought we experienced things fully and truly. And she listened beautifully for about 40, 50 minutes, didn't say very much. And then she just said, yeah, I've got a book for you. And she gave me a book. And really, that was it.
And the book was?
One Thought Changes Everything by Mara Gleason.
Oh, yeah.
And so I took it back to the studio. I tossed it to the side. People were giving me books all the time. Oh, I'll get to that. And then I think about 3 days later, I thought, oh, wait a minute, I need to know about this book. I'm going to speak to Colette at some point. I need to have at least looked at it. I picked it up and looked at the back cover and didn't really understand it. And then I read about 2 or 3 pages, and it was a drop the mic moment for me. And as Mara would say, and I'm friendly with Mara now, she would say, isn't it nice to know that somebody else knows what you've seen? And that kind of took me at the time.
Say more about that, George. Say more about that.
I'd spent about 10 years kind of trying to support people without enough real understanding of what I was talking about. But I knew some stuff. And I knew we were all the same. I knew that every being was fundamentally the same. I knew we'd all the same kind of potential. Physical challenges notwithstanding, there was always that kind of able. Something was able. I don't know how I thought about it at the time, but certainly I knew that because when I was younger, I spent a lot of time in hospital. I wasn't doing good academically. It was very much a kind of conversation around, oh, well, you're not going to be academic. You won't be able to do this. And I rallied against that, actually. So, and then, in that rallying, I was performing, it would be perceptibly by other people really well. And so then I was trying to say, well, it's just this. It's just, you just do this and you just do that. Well, in a way, Mara was saying to me, yeah, we all have this. We all have this. We're born with this ability. We all have it. And you've touched on it, George. Isn't it nice to know that you're not going mad? That there is something you've been seeing. But let me explain the full picture to you. And from that, in the last 8 or 9 years, I've been taught by some beautiful teachers, I would include you in that, Christian, about how something very simple. In point of fact, I say lots of teaching, but it's all pointing to the same thing. That through our own ability to have thoughts and bring them to life through consciousness, we experience life, we feel life.
Yeah. I wonder if I could just go back slightly to one thing you said when you opened the book and read a couple of pages. You had a mic drop moment, and funnily enough, as I was driving here, I was listening to something which was nothing to do with our work, but somebody was talking about they'd had a weight problem and change, and they said information wasn't enough. And I think I thought absolutely that's true. And what I also know is the next bit is how change really occurs with these intransigent problems, or learning more about who we are, or getting in touch with that potential within. How change happens is through insight, and that's the word I would use for what you're calling a mic drop moment. And also that's something that is also available and happening for everybody, but often they pay it very little heed. They really just don't have enough awareness and respect of how powerful that capacity is. Just to have a complete change of perspective, a complete change of direction in a moment.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was a passage that read something like she was being held at gunpoint in South America, and she became very quiet within herself, and she touched the guy's hand and said, "It's okay." Now, I know it to be true that we're all okay, whether we think it or not. So, whatever insight I had in that moment, and I did have one, it was a clear insight that we're all the same. Some of us are obviously going through frightening moments. That we're all experiencing fear and loss and love and fun, and it's the whole gamut. And that we're not, what I know to be true now is that we're not broken, but we could have habits that are so strong that our life's potentially a little bit dysfunctional. I'm thinking about the guy that felt he had to rob somebody. And Mara was able to say, "You're okay." And then he put the gun away, and away they went. And I was like, yes, that is it. We're all okay, really. That was my insight.
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, funny that you should talk about that my first really big insight was, I'm not broken. Nobody's broken, which was not a denial of problems that had existed in my life, but there was but for quite a long period prior to that moment of clarity, I had kind of believed that I was broken. I believed that that was humility, and I believed it was my job to work hard on my brokenness to kind of try and fix myself. And there was just, I heard someone else say nobody's broken, and it wasn't because they said it. It was that in that moment I knew the truth of that. But without there being any denial of what might have happened in my life, but I knew that ultimately I wasn't broken, and I never had been. That those resources that each of us have of creativity, wholeness, connection, love, peace of mind were available to me and to everybody else, and they always had been. I just didn't know. I had not always known how to align myself with them, or to become kind of insightfully aware of them always.
Yeah, and to pay a little bit of homage to that, I would say, without the beautiful teachers that have so kindly stepped forward to point something out for me, I would have bumbled on.
Yes, I sometimes hear some of our colleagues say things like, "Oh, you know what I know," and and today I know what they're getting at. But without those teachers, it may have been a very long process before I woke up to things. Now, I had a or ever, but in fairness, I had started having some quite profound insights before I stumbled, before I stumbled across the principles in a training program, which I thought was a training program about something else altogether. Um, and I had one, for example, was that you really have to tune into your own inner voice. You really need to start listening to yourself. And I kind of knew what that meant. It was more than the words, the words of the sort of wrapper, the headline, but in that, I mean, it happened in the most ordinary of circumstances in an underground garage somewhere, but I knew, and it really was a life-changing insight. It shifted the way I dealt with and sort of problematic things, or even minor things. Just take a moment to tune into what's right for me here.
Yeah, yeah, and also I would say, because interesting thing you talk about, because it is true that in the one level we all have the knowing, but you might, and I was certainly living a life where that knowing wasn't really helpful to me, because it needed something else to help me to bring it up into more of a consciousness of what was going on. And I use the word realizing in two ways. So the first realizing was an insight that somebody was saying something to me and it felt true. It felt, for me at that time, felt true, whatever that was, in any time they ever did it. And the second realizing is then with that new, if I like more seen understanding coming from deep within, I could make it real. I could use it and it would work in life. I had to try it. Any insight I've had to try. And then go, oh, there's the double meaning of realizing, making it real for myself on a go forward basis. Yeah.
Nice. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me, I mean, that this is just my observation from my own life, and maybe from people that I've worked with, that um, those insights bring with them the power to make real. I mean, they can be ignored. One can just, shove it back in the. But assuming there's a willingness, they bring with them the power of change, the power to show up differently, either in a tiny way or in a huge way.
Well, yeah. And again, to talk to that, I didn't realize where the staleness was coming from. That had to be shown to me. I didn't realize that as beings, we've got the capacity to be up in our mind in future past. And how I describe it is most of the time, if not all the time, when you're imagining the future, it's from something from before or amalgamations of. So it's old. So I was living in old. I didn't realize I was living in old. I wasn't allowing my mind to settle and just be in a brand new moment.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, one thing that I've seen, with a kind of renewed clarity, quite, over the past year or two, is that nearly, well, I would really go as far as to say that all emotional pain is coming from a fantasy about the past or the future, or as you say, a combination, the past projected onto the future, or a version of the past projected onto the future, or what we imagine is happening over there, or what we imagine Joe's got, or and it is seldom about what's happening here now. So all emotional pain, it seems to me, is a construct where we're innocently using our minds against ourselves, and it doesn't seem like that. It seems like it's just hitting us. It seems like it's just coming out like a fire hose. But actually, this work gives us the opportunity to kind of slow down and see that and come back to what's here now. And I'm not suggesting we had an event this year where our family cat had to be put down, and she was 17 and she'd had a long and happy life and been very much loved, and she was just getting old and frail, and we found a vet who would come to the house and came to my daughter's flat where the cat now lived, and it used to be that I would be really awkward about showing. I can just sort of cry very easily at, at things like that, but I'd feel really a sort of need to hide that. But on this occasion, I just as I walked up the stairs and rang the bell, the tears were flowing, and my daughter opened the door and the tears were flowing, and we hugged, and the vet came, and he was just this lovely man, and we had this sort of procedure, but we were all crying. And at one stage, the vet gave me a hug, and my friend said to me after I was talking, the vet gave you a hug as though it was something really inappropriate. And it just wasn't. We were all in love in that moment and loving our wee cat, and and so when I talk about pain being of not here, not now, I mean, there are things like that where it's a full. There was complete presence there and connection with all of us, all of the beings involved in that moment, and the thing is, when one is, it seems to me that when that's fully embraced, that it moves through. It moves through, and what's left is fond memories of our cat and pictures. And my daughter's done a beautiful painting of her, and stuff like that. But there's no kind of intolerable pain or anything like that. It's a strange thing, and I think Jung said something about the only pain that can be avoided in life is the pain that comes from avoiding legitimate pain, or something. He probably puts it a lot more elegantly, but that struck me as a great example of that.
Yeah, you said a few interesting things there to me. I'm saying to people recently that my memory is improving, and they're wondering what I mean. I said, well, look, I can only tell you what it was like before and what it's like now. So I said, right. Before, I'd be at social gatherings and so on, but I wouldn't be there. I'd be too full of what future past. I'd be on what is in the future. I'd really just be in the enjoyment of just that very going on. And so now that I'm spending a bit more time here, I'm remembering the here, the new here. I'm more available to make a memory. And that was fascinating for me.
Yeah. Because your attention was not present, and therefore a week later, I'm saying you, but me, obviously me too. Yeah, that's a very nice. I like that observation. Very nice.
So that's the one thing, and that touches the just showing up as yourself, and some of the words using like available. Another word I love is responsive, because I didn't know that I was so not here a lot of the time that I would knock a cup over. Because in my memory, future past, the cup wasn't there. So I've noticed that the more I'm just here, ordinary, and not even up here thinking about who is here, ordinary, just here, I'm more responsive to life. There's more new happening. It's lovely, like this. Just this.
Yeah.
So I'm responding. I'm really able to respond to the feeling I'm getting from what you're saying.
Yeah, that's interesting, George, because I was thinking as I was coming here, we haven't rehearsed anything. I asked you to send me 2 lines of bio, which you kindly did, and that was it. And I have, but zero concern about needing to rehearse anything, because I know that from our many previous conversations that it will just flow. And the most important thing I can bring to this is my presence, tuning into what's occurring to me in the moment and listening as deeply as I can to what you're saying. And it's an astonishing thing. And that would be an example to me of how much more effortless life becomes, as we delve into this work, that there really isn't the requirement to come up with a script and practice it and compare it. That what happens here now is the most important thing. That's like that's likely to be the best version of what's available. And it's funny, when I used to be a lawyer, I was a court lawyer, and I really noticed then I didn't have the overarching explanation that the principles has provided me with, a lot of how we operate and how life works. But I did notice that it was a mistake to be over prepared if you were, going to conduct cross examination, because you're the very best way to do it would be to be listening carefully to the witness, to have a knowledge of the case in your head, and be listening carefully and allowing things to pop up, and then being guided to put those questions. And if you were over prepared, your mind was all over the place about what's in the notes, where's that bit in the notes, how does that fit in, and there were all sorts of preconceptions, and nearly always that the testimony went in a completely different way. But it was, I really noticed that the value of being present and responsive, as you say, rather than rehearsed in that situation.
Yeah, and for anybody listening, we're all up to it to some degree or other, until we get more understanding, of course. Is you can't be responsive to new and fresh when your mind is full of your notes and you and what you're going to say and your pre-recorded ideas and answers and so on. It was too full. It's too full. You would be so, I'd kisses to every being that's doing that because it's so innocent.
Yeah, and the irony is that we're kind of conditioned in our culture to to do more of that sort of preparation and learning, and clearly there are situations where that might be the way to go, but often it's not. And another example where I, as you know, I've been involved in the recovery world for a long time, but an absolutely extraordinary thing which I love is that in recovery meetings, people are encouraged to tell their story, and obviously they know their story. They know that's something that they know, but absolutely, or virtually everybody has the capacity to do that and to talk without notes, without preparation, for maybe 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. It varies from place to place, but it's an extraordinary thing. And sometimes people, I saw somebody recently, he happened to be a doctor, and he'd made notes and he thought it was an improvement, but it just sounded stilted in comparison to, even people with absolutely zero education, people who might be illiterate, can do this in an incredibly powerful way, because that showing up as yourself, being vulnerable, telling the story of your life and what's going on for you now is so impactful. It's such a gift to the room.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's lovely. And as part of that, I was then taught how to listen for the feeling. Because I didn't really know at the time. I thought words were true. I thought every word was seen the same way by everybody. Now, I kind of knew it wasn't, but I thought if you just said the right words, then that would explain. And I didn't realize that words are so limited that if you just almost listen to the space between the words, you get a feeling. And that's what I like to talk to. Like, I really got a feeling there from what you were saying about when some of us think we're broken, and maybe our habits and our actions would suggest that something's wrong. To find a way to have a forum to somehow get your feeling out, didn't matter what you say. To be true in the feeling. I feel this way is to me the first opportunity for any guide you are to hear that feeling and then gently walk them back to their own total and absolute well-being. It's always there, regardless if they think they're not. And to be there for that. And I mean, grace for you. And, I encourage all beautiful beings that are there for other beings. I mean, I can't rate a job highly enough. Then some, I can't. People like you that dedicate your life to supporting others, to just live a good life in balance of dreaming and then presence, and then dreaming and then presence. And one of the things that we teach, and I know you do too, and whichever way you teach it, is those of us who can see what's actually going on in reality enjoy the dream the most. Now, before I didn't know I was dreaming, I thought what was going on in my head was true. And the reason I thought was true, but didn't stop to question it, is kind of like my action. I'd then get feelings from it, and then I'd act on it, and then wonder why I acted on it. Well, all that was happening is I wasn't seeing that I was creating the thought, and the thought was frightening me, and then I had all these frightening chemicals, and I didn't like them, and then I tried to stop them by saying or doing. But now when I get anxious and I flutter, I just say, I must have created some thoughts for that. And I just wait. And I suppose this is one of the powers of his modern understanding, is that even though living in the experience of our thinking, beautiful ones, and feeling and the experience of life, that we now know we don't have to act on them.
Yeah, and it is so helpful. I had a situation at the weekend with a family member that was where they had, I thought something was agreed, and they completely changed their mind, and my initial response or reaction, if you prefer, was I was very angry, and I was annoyed that I hadn't been given more notice, and so on. I had a whole, a whole constellation of kind of fairly negative reactions. But I knew, I think what's great about this work is that I knew that would pass, and to me, despite everything I know, it felt like this change of heart here has caused my feelings. But there was another part of me that knew that wasn't true, and I knew that I would be able to come back to a kind of neutrality where I can see the situation without the negative feelings, and also I knew that a path of action would become clear to me. Wisdom would present itself with some ideas about how to deal with the new situation, the new reality, which had nothing to do with my emotional response. And that's exactly what happened. And there's no lasting resentment or difficulty or distance with this family member. The situation is largely, if not entirely, resolved. But it's a very different way of dealing with things, because there was a time where that kind of situation would have, like, the next thought would have been, that person is so unreasonable, and I'd be marshalling forces against them, and my self-righteousness, and it would escalate rather than dissolve.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I've just been doing a bit of study on the hemispheres of the brain. And what's being pointed to is that the left side of the brain, the one that wants to be the boss, has the power to think things and then justify them with nothing to substantiate. And if it wasn't for the right side of the brain, the reflective ability we have, we would run amok. So another way of saying it's the same work. I'm speaking to people about this and saying, look, the ability, and we've all got it, but the action, or the I'm just going to say the doing of reflection, is the antidote to stress, because we get perspective. Now, for anyone listening, I want to just be clear about something. I don't want to point to me. I don't know what every time, but I want to point to me. The other week, I got in a wee snoddle with my wife. I got something about technology. I got frightened. I was very overbearing. And then I left, actually. But I think it was either later that day or the next day. I gave it a bit. I said, look, I'm really sorry. I got really anxious about something. And my reaction wasn't great. So I want anybody to hear this to know we're for a while we're going to get caught in action, but the work shows us that over time we can be, instead of action, instead of feeling, which is going to happen, we can start to see the origin of it was a thought or a collection of thoughts, a multitude of thoughts that created the fear, that created an action that meant I said something, I was overbearing. No, it's this way, it's that way, and then a little bit of reflection, which is the antidote, because I was under stress, I'd created the stress, was the antidote to the stress and reflection. And then I was able to, I want to say to people, if you fall out, doesn't matter, just know that you did it and you can apologize. It's fine. People are forgiving beings.
Yeah. There's an expression that we use in our family, which is only the love is real. And, I think it's a nice reminder for me that what implicit in that is that sometimes we're acting unlovingly, as it were. And I think, that I'm completely comfortable about that today. None of this is a counsel of perfection. And but it's that thing of and it does seem true to me that all that bad behavior comes from being caught up in one's own mind and having thoughts of being threatened, feeling insecure, all of that stuff. And it genuinely isn't real. I mean, seldom do we look back and think, I'm really glad I, sorted that so and so out. Might be times. And even that might be sometimes the loving thing to do is to, draw a boundary or whatever. But the point is that it really looks true to me that only the love is real, and the rest of that stuff that comes from transient insecurity is just part of being human. But it's not what we want to hang our essence to in any way.
I totally go with that. I've noticed that when I noticed how amazing all you were, all you amazing beings, infinite potential, I fell in love with you, and it hasn't stopped. And so when I operate from that, which you're saying is the trueness of our nature, which is this love and going at a good, sane pace, and then I'm more able to say something or point to somebody that might look to somebody else like maybe a frank thing that I said, but because it's said in love, it's usually taken that way. And especially if it's prefaced with, this is how I see it. I know full well it's not the truth. It's just the way I'm seeing it.
Yeah. George, I can't believe it, but we are actually coming towards the end of our time. But before we do, just a couple of kind of closing questions. If somebody were to ask you, why should I come and work with you, George, and learn about this three principles thing? How would you reply to that?
Lovely, honey. My first instinct is, oh, there's no shouldn't, and there's no should. If you feel that there's something that you've been kind of aware of, there's more to life than what you might have thought. There's a deeper existence, which is easier and more helpful, more creative, more resourceful, more responsive, more now, and you feel you want to live a bit more there, you've maybe been caught in your head a bit, then by all means, reach out to any of us. We're just guides, we're nothing else.
Nice. And if someone specifically wanted to get in touch with you, where would be the best place to contact you?
The best place to contact me is just through my general design email. I do all my work from there. I didn't bother creating a new one for this work. So it's george@weareignite.group.
Thank you so much for today. It's been lovely. The time has just raced by, and that's us bang on 40 minutes. So thank you very much indeed.